Hi there, it's Maria, your Midnight Baker, with another sewing tutorial for a homemade face mask. So the CDC recently changed their recommendations and are now encouraging people to wear a face mask when out in public. I really like this 3D style mask because the pattern is really simple and you don't need to cut out any curves, but it still is designed to make a very fitted mask without a lot of gaps along the nose or the side of your cheek, which I found is one of the biggest issues with the masks that have the pleats folded in. So here's what you need. To get started, you'll need 2 pieces of fabric measuring 7.5 inches by 10.5 inches, scissors and a ruler, and in my case, fabric ties because I don't have any elastic. Now, the New York Times published an article recently called "What's the Best Material for a Mask?" that basically said 2 layers of high-quality quilter's cotton or batik were some of the best performing designs. So let's talk a little bit about fabric. Here I've got some good quality quilter's cotton, which are all 100% cotton. These first couple have a printed pattern, which means it has a right side and a wrong side. You can also find solids, which have no pattern and are dyed, so both sides look the same. Now here is some batik fabric, and here's the key to identifying batiks. Both sides of the pattern will look the same, and that's because the pattern is created through dyeing the cloth and not printing on just one side. Because of this process, they tend to be more tightly woven and have a higher thread count, which is why they performed well on those filtration tests. So for this tutorial, I am using 1 layer of blue batik fabric and 1 layer of solid, just because it'll make it easier for you to see what I'm doing. But if you can, use 2 layers of batik fabric. Okay, so back to making the mask. 2 layers, and I'm gonna use this handy little quilting ruler I have to cut off a 2-inch triangle from all 4 corners. You can also just use a ruler to measure 2 inches from the corner and cut across in that diagonal. Then at the sewing machine, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you're going to stitch all the way around, pivoting at the corners and remembering to leave a 3-inch opening on one of the long sides so that you can flip it right side out. Now just flip it through the opening and use your finger to push out all the edges and the corners. You'll see that the fabric will want to naturally fold inward at that opening, so just fold it flat and line up those edges. Back at the machine, we're going to top stitch all the way around, staying close to the edge. For top stitching, you'll want to stay pretty close to the edge, about 1/8 of an inch or even a little bit closer. I actually start on the side where the opening is, go all the way around, and then sew over that first seam a second time to really secure it. Make sure you backstitch at the end too. Okay, so this part is why I used a solid white fabric instead of a second layer of the same batik fabric. You're going to fold the long edge in on the spot where the corner is, and then you're going to sew right on top, again keeping about 1/8 of an inch from the folded edge. You see me backstitching at the beginning and the end here too, but actually I recommend that you don't do that because it just builds up the thread and you're going to secure it down in a later step anyway. Go ahead and repeat this on the other side. Now this is not folding into thirds, so you don't have to worry about accidentally catching that first side. They will overlap a little bit, but not completely reach the other side. So here's the part where the mask will now curve around your face. You're going to take that corner and fold it back to the edge so that the seam is straight up and down. Clip it into place and do the same on the other corner, again taking it straight down to the other edge so that it's basically vertical. You're just going to slide this under your needle and sew both of them down from top to bottom right along the same stitch line that's already there. For this part, make sure you backstitch at the beginning and at the end. You'll notice as you sew that there's a space in between the two folds, and yes, that is intentional. If you don't have a space, you probably didn't get that corner folded all the way back to the edge. So here's that first side. You can see that my line wasn't quite vertical, but it's creating that curve in the mask. Repeat on the other side, again taking that corner, folding it back to the edge so that it makes a vertical line, and clip that into place. Do it with the other side, fold it down so it also makes a vertical line, clip that into place, and sew, securing with back stitching at the beginning and the end. And your mask is basically done. You'll see why this tutorial is called the 3D mask, and it's so much easier than cutting curved pieces from a pattern, which I have done. I've actually tried 4 different patterns, and I think this one is the best. So onto the ties. If you have elastic, just cut it to the size that you need, but I'm using a 1-inch wide strip that I cut off the bottom of a knit t-shirt. It's important that it's a knit t-shirt and not a cotton tee because knit fabric doesn't fray. You're going to need 4 ties, and these are about 1 foot long. I also tie a knot on one end just to make them easier to handle. Okay, let's take these over to the sewing machine because we are almost done. Just tuck the end without the knot into the seam and fold it over. Sew across the fabric tie or the elastic twice. Keep your needle in the down position and pivot. Sew down the side and insert another tie at the bottom before you close it off. Repeat this on the other side, and that's it. So this mask fits really well for most adults, and you can see how it stays pretty snug along the top of your cheek and along your ear without any big gaps. I modified the measurements from the original video I watched because her measurements seem to work best for my 12-year-old. So if you're petite or you're making masks for a child, you can use smaller pieces of fabric as shown and only cut off 1 3/4 inches from the corners. Now, if you're still watching, I wanted to share one quick tip for if you plan on making more than one mask. I suggest using paper or cardboard, measuring the 2 inches from the corners, and then cutting it out to make a stencil. That way, you can quickly lay this on the fabric and mark lines easily using a pencil, and then assembly line sew to make a lot of masks really quickly. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Bye!